Welcome back to Unsolicited Feedback, the podcast where we cut through the noise, skip the corporate jargon, and get real about what actually drives results. Because let's be honest, hope is not a business strategy. I'm your host, Chuck Knabusch, the operations guy. After 40 plus years across the military, corporate America, and now entrepreneurship, I've seen what works, what breaks, and why leadership planning and execution are the great separators between average and exceptional results. As you're catching the replay, send your thoughts or challenges directly to me at chuck@13ten.com, chuck@13ten.com. Hey, your time matters, so let's jump straight into today's topic. Just because you've opened the box doesn't mean you understand operations. Let me start with a story that, on the surface, has nothing to do with operations, and somehow, yet explains everything about operations. We were sitting in an offsite, one of those day-long type sessions, flip charts on the wall, coffee that had probably already gone cold. The kind of meeting where you start by going around the room, sharing backgrounds, perspectives, experience, before diving into whatever the real agenda is supposed to be. At one point during the introductions, a packaging engineer was talking, a colleague of mine, and he asked a simple question: how many of you know about packaging? And almost every hand in the room went up, which made sense. We all open packages. We've all seen good packaging. We've all been frustrated by bad packaging. Torn boxes, excess plastic, impossible clamshells, products damaged in transit. We experience packaging all the time. Then he asked another question: how many of you have worked directly with packaging design? A few hands went down. He asked a few more questions about material trade-offs, shipping abuse, cost constraints, cube efficiency, disposal implications, customer experience. With every question, fewer hands stayed up, until eventually there were no hands still raised. Then he said something I've never forgotten. He said, "We all think we know packaging because we open boxes. But perfect packaging costs almost nothing, protects the product from handling and shipping abuse, and disappears the moment the customer opens it." Think about that. And then he asked, how many of you have ever thought about packaging that way? There was silence, as you might expect. But here's the part that matters. Every single person in that room had experience with packaging. Not one of us had expertise in packaging. And the gap between those two things, experience and expertise, is where most organizations quietly hurt themselves. Because I've seen the exact same dynamic play out in operations for my entire career. Operations professionals design complex systems with hundreds, sometimes thousands of interacting variables. And when they do it well, it looks easy. So easy, in fact, that everyone assumes they understand it until something breaks. And then suddenly everyone becomes an operations expert. That's what this video is all about. Not ego, not turf protection, not stay in your lane. It's about why invisible expertise gets mistaken for simplicity, why that creates chaos in organizations, and what leaders can do differently if they actually want results. Here's the biggest problem: mistaking familiarity with operations for understanding operations. The biggest problem isn't that people have opinions. The biggest problem is that operations touches everything. So everyone feels qualified to comment on it. Everyone experiences lead times, inventory availability, quality issues, delays, missed commitments, overtime, expedites, customer complaints. The list goes on and on. Just like everyone experiences packaging. But experiencing the outcome of a system is not the same thing as understanding how the system is designed, constrained, optimized, and held together. Operations is where strategy becomes reality. Trade-offs become visible. Complexity becomes unavoidable. Yet it's also the function most often treated as obvious, intuitive, common sense. But here's the quiet truth. The better operations performs, the less visible its expertise becomes. That invisibility creates a dangerous illusion. If it looks simple, it must be simple, right? And when leaders believe that, they do two things. One, they undervalue operational expertise. And two, they override systems without understanding the consequences. Let's talk about a secondary challenge. There's a second related problem that makes this even worse. Operations professionals are often too good at absorbing disruption. They patch, they compensate, they work late, they heroically make things work, which means leadership doesn't see the real cost of interference until the system finally breaks. And by then, the damage is already done. So, what might the biggest symptoms be, you ask? Well, everyone shows up with answers when something goes wrong. Here's how this usually plays out. When operations is running smoothly, no one asks how it works. No one questions design decisions. No one asks what trade-offs were made. But when something slips, a missed shipment, a backlog, a quality issue, suddenly people from every function have ideas, opinions multiply, priorities collide, and direction changes daily. You'll hear things like, why don't we just add more inventory? Can't we just expedite everything? Why don't you run overtime? Why don't you just hire more people? Why can't you be more flexible? Yeah, and none of those questions are malicious. They may even be well-meaning, but they're also disconnected from the system reality. What's interesting is where this doesn't happen. You usually don't see operation leaders telling accounting how to optimize tax strategy. How about marketing telling payroll how to process wages? Sales telling materials how to calculate carrying costs versus safety stock. Why? Because those functions are understood to require specialized expertise. Operations? Well, operations looks obvious until it isn't. So what do most people try to do to fix the problem? They add pressure, overrides, and short-term fixes. When things go wrong, most organizations default to action. Not thoughtful action, visible action, because action feels good. They add more meetings, demand daily updates, escalate decisions upward, shorten timelines, change priorities midstream, override standard processes, just this once. It feels productive. It feels decisive. It feels like leadership. But what it really does is inject noise into a system that depends on stability. So here's the irony. The very behaviors meant to help operations often increase variability, which is the enemy of flow. Operation systems are designed around assumptions, constraints, capacity limits, lead times, and trade-offs. When leaders bypass those designs without understanding them, they break planning logic, they undermine trust, create conflicting signals, force operators into constant reaction mode. In packaging terms, it's just like saying, just use more material, make it stronger, make it cheaper, make it easier to open, all at the same time. And you can't. So why do those solutions rarely work? Because systems don't respond to pressure. They respond to design. So here's the counterintuitive truth most leaders miss. You cannot pressure a system into better performance. You can only redesign it. Operations performance is not driven by effort, intent, urgency, or intelligence. It's driven by structure, constraints, and flow, feedback loops, and decision rights. When leaders step in late, under stress, and start issuing directives, they're treating a system problem like a motivation problem. And systems don't respond to motivation. They respond to math, to physics, to cause and effect. And this is why the packaging engineer's insight matters. Perfect packaging disappears. So do great operations. When operations is working, products flow, customers are served, issues are handled quietly, variability is absorbed, trade-offs are managed intentionally. When leaders don't understand that design, they unintentionally destroy it, one helpful decision at a time. So what's one thing that actually moves the needle? Great question. Shifting from giving answers to understanding trade-offs. If there's one thing leaders can do differently, just one, it's this. Stop giving solutions. Start asking trade-off questions. Instead of, why can't you just ask, what trade-off does that decision create? Instead of, why don't we add inventory? Ask, what problem was this system optimized to solve? Instead of, why can't we be more flexible? Ask, what breaks if we change this? This does three powerful things at once. First, it respects operational expertise. Second, it surfaces system design logic. And third, it improves decisions without undermining accountability. Leaders don't need to stop engaging. They need to engage earlier, more thoughtfully, and with curiosity instead of certainty. Treat operations like packaging. And here's the final reframe. Operations is like packaging. Everyone experiences it. Few understand its design. When it's done well, it disappears. When it's misunderstood, it becomes painfully visible. The goal isn't to make operations obvious. The goal is to make it reliable. And reliability only comes from respecting expertise, designing systems intentionally, letting operators do the work they were trained to do. So the next time something goes wrong in operations, and it will, pause before offering the fix. Ask yourself, am I reacting to the outcome, or do I understand the system that produced it? Because opening the box doesn't make you a packaging engineer. And experiencing operations doesn't mean you understand what it takes to make them disappear. And that's a wrap for today's episode of Unsolicited Feedback. Thanks for joining me, but don't just nod along. Apply something from today's conversation, because results don't just show up from listening. They show up because you did something. Even one small action this week will move the needle farther than a month of good intentions. If you want to go deeper, scan the QR code or schedule a 30-minute strategy chat. I'd love to hear how you're using planning, leadership, and execution to make sure hope never becomes your business strategy. Drop a comment and like the episode. I'm Chuck Knabusch. Until next time, stay focused, stay disciplined, and don't you dare rely on hope.